every minute little fruit fly or gnat or bacterium, I will go so far as to say, is an event upon which this whole cosmos depends.
We're here with Matthew Hayes of WWG Gaming. Matthew, how are you?
I am doing well, feeling very rustic.
This is beautiful. We're going to be talking about the game Everything, and I couldn't imagine a better window to be looking at than your corner of the world. This is down in Tennessee?
Yeah, man, we're in Nashville, where it is starting to warm up consistently. We're seeing consistent 70-degree-ish highs, which is nice. So we've had a few warm snaps and cold snaps, but I think we're warming up. So the birds are singing, things are starting to turn green, things are starting to blossom without fear of freezing over and dying.
I noticed you live quite far away from somebody. What's the matter? Got a restraining order against you?
What's that?
I don't see another soul in sight.
Yeah, it's we live pretty much on a big hill. I mean, if you zoomed out about half a mile and looked at our house, it would just look, like part of a big green hill. So it's nice. We're in a nice part of Tennessee, part of Nashville, where we're a little secluded and have plenty of trees and greenery and wild animals around us. There's deer and turkeys and all manner of birds and small beasts, but we're still very close to like stores and bars and fun stuff.
Sounds great. So a bunch of animals on Big Green Hill. Sounds like the new level of Sonic.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
pretty much.
Speaking of nature and a bunch of crap, you've been playing Everything. You're onto the New Game Plus. For people that don't know, this is a game that is you can be anything, you can be everything. It has a heavy philosophical narration to it. Mm-hmm. That's about as much as I know. What can you tell us what the hell this game is about?
That honestly, if I had to come up with, the gist of the game to tell somebody who hasn't actually played it, that would probably be exactly what I say. It's hard to describe to somebody. It's more in line with maybe the walking sim genre of game, because you don't really do a whole lot. You just kind of move around for most of the game and find very small points of interest, but there aren't really any objectives or goals. There are suggestions of things to do every now and then, but they it's not a linear game whatsoever, and it's highly experimental. It's not for everybody, but it does feel like a very important game, and it is extremely philosophical in its context and delivery. And some people may see that as maybe almost like too highbrow. The only actual voice you're going to hear in the game is that of Alan Watts, who is a late 20th century philosopher. Most of his lectures were recorded probably in the 60s and 70s, and he is one of my favorite human beings in the world. He's definitely changed my life. That's the main reason I was drawn to this game, is because I knew that it featured narration from Alan Watts, and I personally have consumed many hundred, if not thousands of hours of his lectures. Every night before I go to bed, and usually when I'm driving in the car, I listen to lectures, and I would say 80% of them for the past 7 or 8 years of my life have been Alan Watts, and I have several of his books. So he's a fantastic philosopher and historian, all-around scholar, and he was a big part of bringing Zen Buddhism over to the West, and he has a fantastic vocabulary and talent for taking a lot of the abstract concepts of Zen Buddhism and Hinduism and distilling them in a way that Western audiences and laymen to the field of philosophy could actually understand and digest really easily. So I was psyched that somebody created a video game that basically it serves as almost a best of collection of a lot of Alan Watts' lectures. I mean, they're mainly snippets that you find here and there throughout the game. And if you haven't seen any gameplay, I know you've seen a little bit, but if somebody hasn't seen any gameplay, you basically go through this game in levels. You start off as an animal that moves around really strangely, but as you explore, you can kind of descend to higher or lower levels of being. You start as an animal, and then you can eventually maybe become an acorn or a blade of grass or a small bug. And as you're a bug, you may descend to become something more granular, like a little single piece of dirt. And from there, you may descend and explore what it's like to be, like a collection of atoms or molecules. And then you can descend even further, and it's very, very trippy. And the higher and lower states of being are rendered really, really well and look nice. And he goes down to the quantum level where you're talking about things that are just infinitesimal in their scale, things that are much smaller than electrons and quarks, and just things that we don't know even like definitely exist yet, things that are just still hypothesized. And you can be them and explore what it's like to be one of those things. And then you get a very nice surprise when you descend even deeper that I won't spoil. And the same goes the other way around. If you start off as an animal, and then you can maybe become a tree, and then maybe you ascend further and you can feel and explore and see what it's like to be a continent and then a planet. And then you can go out even further and be a galaxy, and then a cluster of stars and galaxies. And once again, once you zoom out far enough past the point of human perception and anything any of our tools have ever perceived and anything our minds have ever conceived is out there in the universe and scale, it gets another really pretty nice surprise that ties everything together. So that's the game. You walk around as different things at all sorts of different scales, and at each level, you will run across certain snippets of Alan Watts' philosophy in his lectures, and most of them at certain scales are relevant to kind of the scale that you are at that moment, and it's always a pretty eye-opening lecture. I didn't run into any snippets that I hadn't heard before, but for people who have never heard of Alan Watts, I cannot even imagine. I'm so giddy and excited for all of the people who are about to have their minds blown by some of these kind of excerpts from these lectures, and that's basically it. So I mean, if that doesn't sound appealing to you, you're not going to like the game. But I really hope that a lot of people check it out and are willing to try something a little more experimental and open their ears and their minds a little bit, and try to take in what this game designer is trying to communicate, because he's trying to communicate something really, really tough in game form.
So, from what I've seen and what I'm hearing, you are taking control of the different beings, and but some of the things that you are taking control of, or maybe that's not even the right term for it. Maybe it's just existing as. I'm thinking of what it would be like to be a continent. So, to me, that sounds like there's not a lot of movement, or is there still movement, or is the star of the show exploration, or is the star of the game the discovery of the new levels? Is there any difficulty in it, or is it completely freeform? So what is the gameplay loop, if there is one?
The gameplay loop is basically entertaining your imagination and saying, man, I wonder, because it gets to the point where you start off as an animal and they move around really silly. They just kind of like flip around in these really jagged, sudden, jerky movements, and you think, man, that's really poor animation. But it's more a commentary on how all beings look at all other beings as being very different and weird and doing weird things in weird ways. Because when you get down to the molecular levels, you can tell, like, okay, this is actually animated really well and looks really, really good. Like, each level and the way that all things move, it's all a statement, and it's all meant to be thought-provoking. But when you're a continent, you look like a giant island, pretty much, just moving around and morphing into other things and like phasing in and out of other continents. It's very, it feels very sandboxy in that way. But the loop, honestly, is in thinking, well, gee, if I can be this, like, I wonder how high or how low, how big or how small I can actually go, and what do things look like in relation to each other. It's the hook is in seeing really how small we are and how big we are by going much smaller and much bigger. It's all about perspective and awareness, and the main hook for me was finding those lectures at every level to listen to. And as you go around, everything speaks and everything sings. Everything has its own voice, and you interact with things, and you sing your song as a rock, and maybe an animal nearby will sing its song back to you, or other rocks nearby or trees nearby will sing their song, and you hear kind of the way they exist in the world. And they all have little lines of dialogue too that are quite insightful. You can see very clearly how much the developer, the designer, put of himself into the game. You can tell how directly inspired he was by Alan Watts' lectures and philosophy. It's this very steady and consistent stream of basically communicating to the player that all of these things, big and small, and the things you can see and can't see and imagine and can't imagine, are all one thing, all one process that is happening. And we have so many names for that process and so many ways of trying to categorize it and distill it and observe it and consider ourselves separated from it. And the whole game and all the dialogue and all the exploration is basically about taking down those barriers and seeing existence in a different way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard people talk about VR, and one of their favorite apps was Google Earth, because the perspective shift of being on Street View and then zooming out to a continent. They said when you have the VR goggles on, your brain feels like you are now much, much taller, or you could zoom down and become much smaller. And they said that was their favorite part of it, was that perspective shift. So in a way, I feel like this game sort of provides a lot of that. So you're trying to sort of journey to, I guess, the center of the earth, or, I mean, is there an end game in sight, or is it really much more about the journey with this game? When you complete it, would you go back and play it again? Would people have different experiences playing this game?
Yeah, people will have different experiences, and there are a few things specifically that will happen in everybody's playthrough that a lot of people, because they're so uptight and so rigid in their thinking, probably won't figure out. There's a part of the game, this is a very minor spoiler. It's not like any of the big things that happen, but I'll go ahead and say this. But if you're like hyper spoiler averse and you don't want to hear anything about this game, if you're super intrigued and you want to go in fresh, then maybe fast forward 30 seconds. But so you start off as an animal in this one specific place, and you can explore a multitude of galaxies and worlds, and you can go so far and so far away from where you start, just randomly, arbitrarily, just really go way far out. And at a certain point in the game, you're told to go back to where you started. Go back to the exact place where you began the game. And you think, there's no fucking way I can get back to that. I mean, there's just no way I could ever find it again. And people will probably put the game down after several hours of trying to find the planet Earth and the spot on Earth that they started from in the form that they started in. And there's a very simple trick to do it that is all about one of the core lessons and core parts of this philosophy that they're trying to impart to you, that you have to embrace if you're going to actually do that again. And a lot of people won't, because when I finished the game and I wanted to go online and talk about it, when I found a thread on NeoGAF of people actually discussing the game, most of it were people asking, how am I supposed to get back to where I started? The game I just got to the point where it tells me to go back to the beginning, and I have no idea how to find it. I've been looking everywhere. How do I do this? And it's been very amusing, and it's very clever on the game designer's part, the little thing you have to do to make that happen. So yeah, it's there are certain things that people are going to find in common as they go through the experience of getting through this game, but it's procedurally generated in such a way that is leading up to that point and after that point. For the majority of the gameplay, as long as you keep moving in any direction, you're pretty much going to unlock more dialogue and find more lecture snippets and stuff like that, and find more to explore and find new things. So there's, you can't really go any wrong way, which is one reason why you can get just so massively lost. But yeah, it's every person is going to experience the game differently. But again, the whole point of the game is to try to impart a change in perspective. There's, it really is, he's trying to force people to broaden their awareness of just how endlessly complex and at the same time unified and simple the entirety of existence is. One of my favorite Alan Watts lectures, and one of my favorite lessons that he would teach, and I haven't found this snippet directly in the game, but I found something very much like it, is he talks about how, as you descend and ascend orders of existence, you always find chaos and order coexisting. He says if you take a Persian rug and you put it under a microscope and you look at a rug, you're going to see just a mass of threads cramming into each other, and it's going to look like utter chaos of all different colors and fuzzes and dirt. But if you zoom out with human eyes and stand 5 feet back and you look, you'll see a magnificent artistic tapestry of a Persian rug. It's just this incredible thing. And he said that basically that concept applies on all levels. We have war and turmoil here on Earth, but if you zoom out far enough, you find this very blissfully spinning planet that's in this perfect orbit around this beautiful glowing thing. And but then you have these comets and these huge asteroids, and even galaxies collide together, and you have supernovas, stars that explode and destroy all this. There's destruction and creation and chaos and order on every level. And it's the same thing when you go deeper down. I mean, a human being is very simple to look at, but then once you put it under a microscope, and you can start seeing cells and cancer cells and things that in the body that break down. But then once you go even further, you start seeing this magnificent order in atoms and the way that atoms are constructed, and how unique and precise they operate, and how they have this strange intelligence about them to form together in different ways to make different things. It's a mind freak once you really grasp that is going on all levels at all times. And it makes you think what we experience here on Earth in the news and in our relationships, and it is such a minuscule part, but it's the one that we associate with almost exclusively, and we doom ourselves to all the worries and the crazy things that happen in our lives, because we only see ourselves as Matt. We only see ourselves as this bag of skin, and we fail to associate our being with everything else that's out there that is actually just this one process happening. So the goal of the game and of this philosophy, and really the foundation of the Hindu and Zen Buddhist worldview is that you have to break down basically the ego. You have to break down everything that makes you associate and believe yourself to be Matt. Matt is a very small role that you play, but it's really, it's just one wave that's part of this very much larger ocean. And it is actually possible to feel that you are the ocean, but it takes practice and, mainly just a shift in perspective and awareness that can come through meditation. It can come through a heaping dose of LSD. It could come through a DMT trip, or somebody very close to you dying and going through some kind of existential crisis. People experience it in all different ways, but a very lucky few people do have that experience where all the boundaries are broken down, and they realize that there is no difference between, what's inside of their skin and what's outside of their skin. And it drives some people crazy, and they think that they're Jesus Christ, and they start cults. And some people, it just creates endless amounts of compassion and wisdom, and they spend the rest of their lives teaching and realizing how beautiful and perfect everything is. So it's that latter experience that people like Alan Watts, through his teaching, is trying to impart to people by shifting their perspective in very subtle and cunning ways. And this guy is trying to do that with a game, which I can't even imagine. You can't force somebody to assume that perspective. They have to arrive there by themselves. But clever tricks that like this game employs, where you start seeing the grand scale of things on the macro level and on the micro level, it starts people, it gives people a little push in the direction of, man, everything that I thought life is a very small part of what life is, and maybe I don't know anything at all. And that's a really great place to be.
Well, it's a beautiful thing that Sony is so supportive of these different game types, because this is an exclusive for PS4, right?
I believe so. Yeah, it may be coming out eventually on PC or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was on PC, but I believe it's because they were hyping it up as part of a promotion. So
yeah,
I think it is just on the PS4. So PlayStation is doing really well with these games. I mean, it's like as soon as you saw Flow and Journey and Flower and all those games coming out to PS4, that's when I felt like I'd made the right choice. Yeah, just and Abzu is another pretty cool one.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of this philosophical side, how successful is everything at achieving anything close in that realm of the philosophy?
You know, I think I can't imagine how I would do it better. And in fact, I've tried to imagine how I would. A couple years ago, when I had more free time, when I was still working at a restaurant, and I had, my days off were just days off, and I had a lot more time to devote to study. I tried to think, if it were up to me, and I wanted to create some sort of system of initiation to get people to assume this different perspective. If there was a way to somehow systemize a shift in perspective, how would I go about that? And if I wanted it to be in a game, how do you create a game? How do you combine visuals and controls and audio in such a way that it forces people to think outside of their typical worldview and boundaries? How do you get people to question everything that they think that they know through a video game? And I don't know. I don't know. I didn't have an answer, and I never have. But this game is a really, really solid attempt to do just that by basically just showing the perspective of things that are very much smaller and larger than you, and gently suggesting how they're related, and then offering this really eloquent and scholarly philosopher's voice to inspire you along the way and open your mind further to different thoughts. I think it succeeds in that regard. At least it makes you think, and it shows you how to think much bigger and smaller, and how to place yourself in the context of the center in the middle of that.
Yeah, video games are, by their nature, an interactive medium. And in that way, they definitely feel like this could be a sort of a different avenue to explore for game makers, that you can try to give people these experiences and allow them to experience different perspectives, whether it's this game that is trying to cover every experience in the world, or other games that are just trying to get you to experience what it would be like to be anything, which is mainly why we play games in a way, and also for that escapism. So it seems like this game, I'd love to see what this game inspires, and the next developers that, some developer that comes along and plays this game, maybe they're not a developer yet, and realize that now they can finally get their dream across. This sounds like it would be pretty great in VR as well.
Yes, I mean, when you assume when you kind of like possess the body of anything, whether it's a galaxy or a molecule, you assume that thing in third person, so you always see the thing. Mm-hmm. But third person view does work very well in VR. Like, you could still control whatever it is you're controlling while still being able to look around. That's why I think this game would actually do really well on PC if they could just really crank up the draw distance and push back the horizon for detail, and I don't know, like 4K textures, like just make it much more detailed and allow VR, I think it could succeed. I do hope that the game gets iterated upon. I hope that they do push it to PC and make it a kind of grander experience. I hope it reaches more people. It does feel like a very important game, and like you said, I'm just shocked and so delighted that Sony is putting their promotional power behind this. Yeah.
This game sounds like it was pretty successful at its attempt. I guess you could recommend this to anyone who's found any of this interesting. What type of gamer would you recommend this to? Is there any crossover at all with other titles?
I don't know. It's hard to like. I don't know how I would review this game, to be honest. I don't know how I would recommend it based on like its value. It's impossible to tell what kind of person will enjoy this, because it's impossible to tell what kind of person I could sit down and have a philosophical conversation with. It's a different experience. If you're open-minded and you're looking for a game to make you think, then I hope you play it. It's something I recommend to everybody outright, and I hope that as many people as possible will get their hands on this and actually play through it and then talk to other people about it. But if you're just like, if you love Call of Duty and God of War and you're looking for a really entertaining game, I don't know if this is really going to like fill that gap for you, unless it just totally takes you by surprise in a great way, and I hope it does. But certainly, I mean, if you're looking for something thought-provoking and different from the norm, it's a game I recommend across the board.
All right, Matt, thanks for joining us. Where can people find you?
That's at Matthew Face, Matthew with 2 T's, and at wwg.com.
All right, I've been Matt Falva. You can find me on Twitter at GameThinkTalk and a 90s Kid. Bye for now.
And that's what this all is. It's jazz. You see? This is a big jazz, this world. And what it's trying to do is to see how jazzed up it can get. How far out this play of rhythm can go.